Cool. Thanks. Yes, we are on the top of the hour. I do hope you hear me. Please say hello if you hear me. At least so we can check that everything's is going on correctly. But yes, let's get started. We have a lot of things to cover. My idea with this was I wanted to give you a glimpse of how easy it is to use the tool and use the Figaf tool to do migration, how you can test and getting started with the tool. And I can see that, yeah, definitely some of the people here have a little more experience with the tool. So, yeah, but the idea here is to give you an understanding of what we can do and what's going on. If you have questions along the way, put them into the chat and I'll try to cover those also. And I guess that is the whole reason for such a session here. I don't want to make it as a long sales presentation. I just want to get you started so you can see it on your own data, because I think that is what is most valuable. The goal is get you familiar with the Figaf tool so you can see how it can implement and be used for your migrations. And you should be able to perform the migration yourself and thereby understand the value and how this can be implemented into your organization. Yes, the course description, 90 minutes. I'm not sure if we can call that a course, but it is to cover how you can create migrations with the tool and get started with it. So these are different tasks that we need to set up. So first we need to install it, we need to configure it. I guess we'll stop this, ignore this part about the DevOps, then we'll do the migration, and let's see what we have time to at the end. But I think that should probably cover a 90 minutes time. Why, Figaf. So a little about what it is that we offer. We do have a full palette of products that enable you to govern, automate all of your existing SAP integrations, from the testing to DevOps, monitor, go live migrations, and both PI, cloud integration, and API management is covered. If we just talk about migrations, these are the covers that we will be able to do. Take an ICO, migrated, generate iflows, and some of the functionalities that is supported out of the box. We have then some of the other parts that we'll see. This is the overview of the migration, creating an assessment of your current landscape. And I think this is really an important part of it. There's also testing of your integrations. And if you're doing a one-to-one migration, you need to be testing these things. So obviously with mappings, there is a lot of things that's similar, but there can also be these small changes in using dynamic attributes, something else that just breaks apart. We'll probably will not cover DevOps in this session. So we have 3 editions, and depending on what edition you have and want to achieve, I guess maybe it's this one that's better. So we have the migration edition. This is our partnership together with SAP. Here we are giving you the assessment, the overview, and the migration testing. And then we also got the other part, which is the DevOps, that allow you to transport, govern. This is more like a continuous usage. And we have the ICO migration. This will take an ICO and convert it. Some of you already have licenses for the tool and can use those to work with it. If you need anything else, the trial versions would also do. Good. Where to run it? For this scenario, we'll probably be running on your laptop, but that is not really the target deployment. I think our main recommendation at the moment is to deploy it in BTP Cloud Foundry, because it just simplifies a lot of the processing that you're using the tool for. It is the same version no matter where you're running it. It's just different backends that is being used here. If you do not have a license for the tool, you can go to figaf.com/devops, or just figaf.com, and there you can sign up and get a license. And I would encourage you to do that while we are on the call if you do not already have one. And yeah, within a few minutes, you should receive a free license that you can use. It's important that you select the on-premise one. The cloud one would not allow you to do migrations. If you get lost, we obviously have help.figaf.com, where you can see some of our knowledge base. Here you can also create tickets if there's any problems. And then we have manuals and our release notes. So this is the target architecture. You deploy it in BTP Cloud Foundry. We would use a Postgres service and then connect it to Cloud Connector. This would probably also be possible to do within this hour, but we've just seen a lot of times you do not have the correct properties, etc. installed. So for now, we'll just deploy this on your local PC. Yeah, BTP credits, I guess it's easiest because you have access there. And server installation, standalone deployment. So I guess this is what we need. A laptop, and yeah, in about 5 minutes, you can be ready with the tool running successfully. Yeah, and obviously, if you have larger data size, you should consider that at least, yeah. And when you're running it, stop with Control-C. Production environment, we support Postgres, Microsoft, Oracle as database, and then we just need a Java runtime so it can run anywhere. Depending on your use case, you obviously then need to have access to the on-premise PI system. The way the tool is licensed is it's licensed on the number of ICOs, iflows, or proxies that you're using the tool for. And each time you start with a new object, that one is licensed. And for migration, it is per ICO or receiver agreements that you're using these things. Okay, let's install it on your laptop. So the idea is you go to this site, download the bat file, and let's try that. I have also put this in the URL, so you can also, or in the chat. So I recommend that you go to the site here. Here, if you scroll down, you will find this Java file here. Download it. Hopefully you can download it. Obviously, there is different security restrictions downloading a Java, etc. So now I have this in my folder. I can then go to this, and I will then create a new folder here called training. If you have the tool running in your, or if you have your home folder in, what is it, OneDrive or something like that, I would recommend that you move this out into your C drive under some temp folder or something like that, because then it just becomes a lot easier and you will not run into naming conventions or problems and trying to replicate these data across the landscape. If you have already run the Figaf tool on your local PC here, so here, you would see that there's a directory here called figaf.irt. This is our database. It is under your local user. So delete that one so you can start over if you want to do that. So now we have the Java file here in our folder. What we need to do is to copy this one to our clipboard, and we need to open a Notepad++, and then we just need to ensure it's using direct file. save it into our training, run run.bat. So have you been able to download it and put the file into a folder in your system? Then once you've done that, you can if everything works successfully, you can just click here and it will run. But here we can see we're running into a problem that there's no Java version installed on here and that is not accessible. So we need to provide a Java version. We do have the Java version we normally recommend is I think it's also up here somewhere. Installation guide. Installing local installation of Figaf. Yeah, here I guess we will cover the same thing. So we will be recommending this Timur, which is a OpenJDK version that you can use, and you can obviously put it into the same directory as we have here. So that's where you find it. We need to find the Java, and I think I have where it is. So it is JDK here. So you just need to copy this, and then you need to put it in front of the that file here. If you are running on Windows or Linux, you may need to use it in a little different way. But we want to pre-code it with the license or with the server here, or with the Java file. Let's try again. It still complains, and this is because there is spaces in the here. You can, I think so. Right now it is then starting up, and obviously you can use this also on your local installation of the tool. And in normal cases, I would then just put in the Adomium OpenJDK inside of this this folder, because then we have access to it. So now the tool is almost running. One of the things we do have here is the log files. Here we can also see what is going on with the tool. We will get different warnings about if it is using a different Java version or if there's any problems with it so far. Good. And we can also see here where it's putting the Figaf database that is in the home directory that we have here. So because it's running here, we do not have the option to cancel it or close it. If we close it up here, the database may be corrupted. So we normally recommend that you click on here, and if you click like this, it will stop the application. So it's not really the best way to run it, but we do have other ways where you can run it. If you want to terminate it, it is Control-C, then that will terminate and ensure all processes are saved when you're running this. Okay. You should get this that the server is running after a number of seconds, and the version, etc. And we can see we cannot find the license for this. Okay, so we will go back here, and in our in here on file, we added the URL that we need to be using here. So we just put in this. And now we can log in, and the user here is super user. Password is default. If you have already run the Figaf tool a number of times and changed the password, you will get a warning saying, hey, this does not work. And then, yeah, either just delete the database as I showed you, go to the C users folder and enter it. And otherwise, yeah, go here. Then I think it will also come up with a pop-up box saying, ask you to change the password. If you're running it on your local PC, it's probably not really a problem to have the super user as the user. Otherwise, yeah, create users, and obviously for productive usage, you do not want to use the super user, and assign user roles to the users that will be using this. It pops up here. We need to do some license configuration. If you do not have a license, I do have a number of licenses that we can use to get started. And here I do have a license here. So here we will load the license, and now it has been synchronized. And when it is synchronized, it means that we have fixed the data about when this, how long time this license is valid, and what is going on with it. I hope you are on so far. We should not have done too much big challenges with this. Yes. So now we have connected it, and let's see here. We have create license, and we need to create the different agents to get started with. I think that is the next one. So right now we will connect it to the CPI system. That is, well, yeah, depends. If you have Neo, it is pretty easy to get started. Oh yeah, if you do not have a license, just either go into the Figaf site and register for license. If you already created one and it has expired, ping me. If the license generation does not work, then also just ping me in a chat and we can figure it out. Otherwise, I do have a number of trial licenses that you can also just sign up and get. And I'll be sharing those with you. But right now we have the tool running. We have checked that the license works, and that should be okay. Okay, it took 20 minutes to get started. Cool. Yes, that would work. Let's see here. Have anything here? Nope. Yes. So let's connect it to the CPI system. I think this is the goal here. So we did have a lot of these different scenarios, but that really became pretty difficult, trying to remember all of these values and copy and pasting, and then doing that just made it too difficult. So we improved the sign up process. So that's not this one. Here we have the tool. So to add a CPI agent, we go to here, agents. Here we select create CPI agent. Let's see here. Here I have my URL for it. So I'll call it dev CPI cloud integration. We will add the URL, the integration URL. It doesn't matter which page, just anyone. It will then trim it and understand what kind of system we are dealing with. Now we are in the process of creating this. simple way, and if you have Neo, you can go here and you can enter the public URL, the API URL, and username password if you have an S user where you have not used single sign-on. Then that is a way to do. But yeah, Neo a lot easier. You can get through that pretty quickly. But if we need to install this, here we go to our BTP cockpit. And then we need to instances and subscription. And obviously this can be a little challenging getting these things created. So we will first create a cloud runtime here. Here we will create it as first the API, I understand. PI to CPI training API. Then we select next. We select the roles, and we will need administrator, auth group, and integration developer. Credential, that's fine. And we will say create. This will then take a little while to create, and in the meantime, we will also create the other one, which is here. We will need to have the message flow plan. So we need the message flow to be able to send messages to the CPI system. And here we need the roles. If you have different roles that you would be using, you can also add them here while you're creating this URL. So now we will create that. And if we then click here on this, these scenarios, we can create the user key here. Oh, here, binding key and secret. That should be okay. We can view here. So what we do is we go copy this JSON here, and then we paste it in here. We select path. We found that that was a little easier than trying to specify which of the fields you needed to copy when working with customers on this. Then we need to do the same for the API key, and since we already created that, and I think there should be some validation that it checks that if it is the right one. Key view here, copy JSON. We paste this in here. And say next. So now we have connected with the public APIs for these scenarios, using first the API key and the message processing key. The next thing we need to do is we need to create the custom identity provider, and this is one of the new concepts that we added to simplify the onboarding, because there is a lot of APIs that are not public, but we would need to do the migration, we need to do DevOps and testing. Obviously, we hope to get away from that, but it seems like a long road for SAP to add these things. To do this, we go to the trust configuration. We select download SAML metadata here. We put it up and open it in our browser. And then we select this URL that is calls post HTTP post. And we copy this URL. Go back to our tool here. And then we need to download this entity descriptor. So the entity descriptor contains, so when we are creating this agent, we're creating both a private certificate and a public certificate. Both of these are then saved in the Figaf tool locally in your instance. And that means that, and then in this entity descriptor, we then use the public certificate, which means that the Figaf tool will then be able to sign in for you. So we will then create a new trust configuration here. We will select this entity descriptor. We will name it train. It should not be available for login. It's not really a problem, but it just confuses users and they don't know which one they need to log on with. So just unselect it. And now, yeah, so you can see this is not really ideal for a trial system that we do have way too many of these. Then we need to edit here. That's the wrong one. Here, PI to CPI train. Role collection. In the role collection, we need to give it the following roles. PI administrator. And to give that, we need to write roles groups equal to admin. We need to do it for admin. And we need to do it for the last one, which is then business expert integration developers. So that was what we needed to do here. So that means that if the Figaf tool then signs on, it will be able to connect to this system. And we'll press save. It checks that everything works out. Do we want to create a trial landscape? Let's just do that now. And that is successful. We can select 2 packages we need for this. That should be okay. And now we can synchronize it. So when we synchronize, and this is both in PI and CPI, we fetch the data that exists from the specific system, and then we are able to actually get everything in place and fetch the data. Let me just see if I can. I'm just on camera me, so we get more time. If you can also, when you're synchronizing this, synchronize the whole thing, then that would obviously be a lot more and take a lot longer time for it to complete. But right now we have a lot of versions of objects that we can be using when checking these scenarios. So what we did now, we connected to the CPI system. There's a lot of things we can work on here. We can also set up CPI helper. Obviously, I hope you use CPI helper to get that working. If you're in, you just need to copy this URL. We can select here an iflow. So we try to make the navigation between back and forth as easy as possible. We just go to plugins here, activate the Figaf one, and then we add the URL here. And if you just have one agent, there's no problem to just do it like this. So that means if I go here, I can use this navigate, which will then bring me back to Figaf for that specific object. Just some of the things that make this journey a little easier. Good. So now we need to connect to the PO system. Any questions on CPI connections? What do I check here? Yes. So the reason why we are using this the SAML key is we had, so previously we had been using just the S user to log on with, and that was working okay, but it had a challenge that it, if you used universal ID, then you would get a captcha at some point in time. Therefore, we added this custom identity provider because that was a lot easier. Our alternative was that we used external identity provider and then used that one when calling. But when you're using this process, we have all the authentication within the Figaf tool, making it easier. And it is still we are thinking that it is still the best solution to handle such a scenario. And what you can actually see if you go back to the cockpit here, and in here in the users, you would then actually be able to see where these users came from. So we can see we got one. I guess there should be one here for the latest one we just created. Here we can see that we have this. So it is a way to keep track of users and still allowed it. The reason is we are using the web APIs of the cloud integration system because there is artifacts that we cannot access, like enabling trace, these kind of things, which is kind of frustrating that you need to do. And we don't have a public API with, so that's the reason why we opted for the solution. Because if we needed to cover all different kind of IDPs, it would be really difficult getting them up and running and making sure that it worked. But with this, it is just a lot simpler to get it started. Any other questions? Just use the chat or the Q&A section. Okay. Cool. So the next one is connecting to the PIPO system. Here you will need to have a user. You obviously need to be on the same network. If or when you get to deploy the Figaf tool in the BTP Cloud Foundry, you need to ensure that you have set up the cloud connector so you know which cloud connector it is using. We do have an option module that you need to install on the system, but I think in most cases we do not need that. So we don't normally recommend doing that unless there is a specific purpose for getting these things. Did anything happen? I forgot. You need to have these API developer, admin, and alert if we need to use the alert setup for this. We also do have some dual stack options. We'll not cover that here, but if you need to record messages. We do recommend that you keep the Figaf version updated because we are adding a lot of fixes from time to time, and especially if you're doing migrations, it's important. So in this release we did today, I think we had 10 different versions of patches to support these needs. Good. But let's see how to do that. So the first thing I normally do is I go to my SAP 002 to my PI system here, and I will go here on the back here. I will go to the agents. Here I will create a new agent, D75. It's a 75 system. I have a user that's called Daniel. You have the URL here that you need to use. Port. What are there any specific scenarios you need here? You need to use the P4 port. This only applies if you're using it on premise, then you can add that. We do not support that using version. And then one of the things I would recommend is that you select this one, use most appropriate version. That means we can switch between the different ways of locking messages. And this is interesting when we get into the testing mode. Here, I'll probably just set it to ICO locking, and this will just use the locking from the ICOs as the default one. So the way we're testing is that we are sending messages through this, and then we're able to see what's going on. We don't need all of these other settings. We just press save, and now we have created this agent. Good. So we can then test it. A recommended process here to check we have all of this okay. It is okay. We do not have these DevOps PI libraries. We do not need them for this specific case. If you needed to do PI DevOps, then you needed to set this up and get started on that. Okay. Good. So we want to do migrations, and to do that, we go into this PI to CPI migration tab here. We will select our source PI system. You can add multiple source PI systems if you want to. We are selecting our target system here, and if we had a production environment on production CPI, we could also add this. The reason is that would then give us an idea about what was going on with that specific target system. So now we need to get the data from the PI. To do that, we press synchronize here and select the CPI system. Remember to select skip data types and skip ESR transport. They are not important if you're doing migrations, and the data types can be really time consuming if you need to download them. So once you press synchronize, it will then go in and fetch all of this data from your system. And this can obviously take quite a bit of time if you have a large system. I don't know if you can hear the fans running on my server here, and we probably will see a large CPU usage. So you'll see here a lot of CPU going on at this point in time. And yeah, the time obviously depends on the size of the system, how many ICOs or message types you have, and how many of the standard SAP versions you have of the system. Once it's downloaded all of this, it will spend some time linking where it will say, okay, where it will need to say, okay, we have this ICO, this is connected to this message mapping, these operation mapping, or this operation mapping, this message mapping. So it has the whole hierarchy back and forth, and that makes it a lot easier for us to manage some of these scenarios that we have. But yeah, this can take a while. We have seen it take quite some time for customers with large system and slow internet connection and low performance computers to get started here. I think I did this another time and it took like 10 minutes for me to generate this, but we have optimized it quite a bit with not all of the data types that was needed for this to get started. Cool. So once you have all of this, you can actually see the data that exists here. And the idea is then that you can go. So let's just here, up here, we have an option here to filter. We can select an ICO here. We can see what are the different objects that it has. Are there any specific scenarios that it's using? Sender and receivers. That is being used here, and we then have an option now to drill down. We can go into the tracked object. Here we can see a lot of information about where this object exists, what are the operation mapping, what are the message mapping, all of these different links that is being used in such a scenario. And this is obviously important when we're doing DevOps or when we're doing something else. Okay. Here if we just look at the scenario, we can go in here and we can say, okay, what does it look like? In some cases, we can see what it is because of the adapter. If it's a file, we know it's exactly once, unless it has an IO on it. This one, I think it's an HTTP, which makes it a little more difficult to actually determine because that is given in the scenario. So we have set it to exactly once, and I think we have a save button all the way down here. So if you have scenarios with HTTP, then you probably need to do something like that. Okay. One of the things I mentioned was that you can also generate the assessment report. So once you have synchronized everything, you go here to generate report. You can select which month you want to have data from, and this will then pull in runtime data for this specific month or period. And then we can open it, and here we can then see a lot of information about the different systems. And I think if you get to this point, you have really a useful tool to plan your migrations. You can see information about what are the objects, what type is it that we have determined this is. And we can see here there are some undetermined that you would need to dig deeper in, and we can see this is the HTTP senders. We can see here those modules. We can see configuration parameters. So you can see how this has been configured. We added this parameter because some of our PI customers were also, okay, can we actually see these externalized parameters that is being changed, what they are and how they would work with this? Now you can also do that. We can see the adapter types. This is important if you want to check out if it is file CSV or what kind of scenario that you are getting through with. Yep. Then we have the operation mappings that is being used, and here we have the different objects where we can see it is using this XSLT, called this in this feature. We have message mappings, XSLT. So we have all of these different artifacts. We can see what are the UDFs that we'll be using in these ones, making it a lot easier for us to determine, okay, what's going on, what are the different UDFs that we would need for this to work. Are there any multi-mappings in it? And we have the same data for the receivers. And the flow is obviously you have a top, an IQ that can then have multiple receivers on. And out here we have the processing log. Here we can see it's been processed 88 times. And I think here we have something that has failed 50 times. Probably makes sense to, and then the idea is obviously consider this details once you're doing the migrations, because if you have something that fails 50 times, you may not want to consider how to deal with that in a migration purposes. Any questions on this or so far that I've not covered, something you're stuck with and want to check out more on? But the idea here was to be able to create the assessment and then get started with the migration. Okay. But the chat is open. If you have more questions, just put them in there. I will go through some of the other concepts. Okay. So now everything's done, or we're ready to start the project. So 45 minutes to to make it work. Obviously, it requires you have access to the system and can configure it there. But that is anyway fairly good, I would say. Good. So we have this scenario here, which is an ICO that's being split into two different scenarios. I definitely do not recommend that kind of scenarios. I recommend a normal exactly once scenario when you're migrating and testing, because that will just simplify things. Okay. The first thing we want to do in this effort is we want to create a test case for it. To do this, we click on record messages. We create a test suite, and all test suites should be linked with something with a test suite, and you probably will select something on that logical component, sales, order, processing, whatever is important for this one. And once we're then doing this, we can then have an option to select different scenarios. We can either select future messages, which will then just record the coming messages that exist here. We can select historic messages, which will fetch the last 30 messages that has been processed, or we can select this chosen messages if we know that there are some messages that has been tested here. So an important part to note here is that when you're doing this, we need to we have the way we're testing is if you have modules in, that's important. We will add SAP logging modules with the setup, and then you would need to wait until some messages has been processed so we can collect them at that point in time. We'll press save here and press save here and then save. So, and now it will start fetching details for these specific messages. We can see it is giving us some problems. No inbound message is downloaded successfully. So there's definitely something with this, because this is we expect it to be BI, but it is not. So we need to go back to our setting here of this. We can see it exactly one we're using. We can override the locking method to use SAP locking. We do not need this. So here we can see if there's anything we know as error. We can see the status up here. But let's see here if I can process another message through this. So now I've just processed a few more messages. It is exactly once. So we can go in here, we can say copy. This will create a copy, and here we can select different scenarios for fetching these data. And then we will pull here, see if it finds anything. Some payload inbound message was not found. Still the same problem that there thinks it is exactly once. BI is not locked. Okay. Another approach is to use the SAP log module on this. So if we do that, press here save, then it would update the communication channels, and maybe that it already has it here because it is something we have used a lot when we have been testing on. So we will just press save here, and what we can then do is maybe it will pull it again. I will not. We will copy it again. Let's try with the future messages. So now it will check the communication channels, update the modules if there's anything missing. And now we can send messages onto it again. I do that on a different screen. And if I then press pull here, Let's see if I'm lucky now. Now I got 2 out of 2 messages being processed. And I can see we can delete these other ones. And sometimes we do find that it does not fetch all of these different data, which is a bit irritating. Or if we have processed it too early, we may find that it does not fetch all of the messages that is being split. Anyway, that will give us some problems when we're testing, but it's also a good case to test that there is some problems with this. And obviously, as some of you probably know that have been using the test, there is a lot of these problems that we need to address while setting up these scenarios to figure out what is going on. So what we can then do is we can create test cases for this. We can select the landscape if we have used that, but it's not important. We will need a license for it. If you have the DevOps version of it, or the free migration edition, this is not a problem. And then we are getting a problem here. So the problem here is that we have an item here called line, and this is a one-to-many scenario. And the complaint and say this is actually will not work. And if we look at the details here in the test case, we can see here we have the line here. And if we look at this edit here, we will see that there is an ID here on the line that we need to go in and specify and say, okay, this is a problem or a definition of this. So to do that, we go back into a test case here. On the test configuration, we will go to the order expression, and here we'll add an XPath. Probably we should add the full XPath, but for this, it's fine to do a simple way. And we can see there's a lot of different scenarios we can set up when we are testing this. So we both have when we're testing, but we also have on the recording configuration. And here we also need to add this expression here to it. And then we can go back here to the test case. We can open here the details, and then we can calculate order numbers. And now we can see it then fetches these order numbers from the documents that we're using. Yeah, a note. Yeah, obviously, right now I'm just testing with few details, but we could expand yeah, with quite a with quite a number of messages. And I think it is important that you didn't just not, well, depending on the type and the logic and the consistency, figure out how many messages do you actually need for this. Because yeah, it really does not matter if you're testing with, if it's a simple scenario where you don't have any specific mapping details in, you probably do not need the large one. But if you have a large data set of messages, if you have a large one, you do need it. So let's see here if we can create the test case now. We can. So now we have created a test case where we have these messages, and we can go in and rename it. So if we click here on the test case, here we can go in and if we want to rename it, we can add. Also, when we're creating, we can add partner expressions, etc. to this here, and we can see here when it was created. So we have a lot of details about these migration cases. Okay. Moving forward, so now we can, in this overview, see we have one migration. We can then go and we can click create a package. Let's see here, we have anything useful. Figaf test 2 sounds like a good name. So here we have CPI message. CPI 2. invoice. So we select the package. Obviously, we give it a name, and then we can select the we'll be using. Questions. Right now we have two profiles. We have a beta, a default, and a beta. And right now we are changing, or in the next release, we're changing the default to be this beta, which is local processes. But you can also use the other one, and we can obviously check here. We can preview it. We are now getting an error because we do not have data for these scenarios. So it does not create the mapping correctly. And this is always interesting. Check. Migrate. This will not work as I expected to do. Well, let's just try to read. So normally it would come up and say, okay, you need to it needs to download some message data that is here, and this is causing some problems. So yeah, and if you're on BTP, it will also work without any problems. Good. And yes, so right now, yeah, we need to update the mappings to do this manually, unless we get it working. Let's see if there's anything in the logs about this. So we do get something here. Cannot get migration result, null pointer exception. So yes, we can. The idea is that you would click on these, and then you'd be able to see it and use them for your specific use cases. Good. Yeah, I will. Yes, this session is recorded, and you'll get it afterwards if everything works out successfully. Okay, so what we got to here was the testing part. We needed to perform the migration. Here we have these custom XSLT parameters that we need to add. And the way to do that is just to go here. There is a code, download zip file. So all of these contains different artifacts that we have. That's a part of this package, and we can then extract this into our. Yes, there is guides also. There's a whole section here called help, figaf.com, and in that one you will find a number of different articles. If you go here, in the help section, you can see this section called guides. Here we have a guide index that will cover a lot of these different things about connecting to the different settings. So let's cover that one also in the UL. Good. Yes, so we need to add this extra templates parameter. I'm not really sure why it fails right now. But it is also a good practice here. So we go back here to the tool, press Control C to terminate it. And then we can go back to our bat file. Here we will then add a new line. And then this will then point to the folder that we just added to here. Here we have this master. We need to point it to this main branch. I normally just put the full path in because then it simplifies a little, like this. The server is now closed, and we can start it up again. Yeah, you can also see here we are getting a lot of these archives. This contains information about the different scenarios that we do have, or if you're doing migration, it will save all of the different bundles. So if you want to create a service case with us, you can send this, and we have all the details that we need to rerun this. So let's try to run the application again. But yeah, it is strange that that one is not working at the moment. And normally I get this wrong to specify where it is. But here you can see the different adapters and how we have mapped it. If we just look at the rest, we can see it is creating these blocks. And the idea is here that you will go and create this manually as a user when you're setting up your development efforts. You'll try these. If they work, you will be using them. Otherwise, you'll create your own versions of these XSLTs. So let's see if it's up and running. 20 seconds, so that's good. We can then go back here. Just need to refresh, I think. We will put it into the folder, not the infrastructure. We can now check. And now we can see we get this up where you can say, okay, it has these parameters, and these are the files that it will be used to map between. So we know that there's difference between the PI and the CPI adapters, and you would need to configure these differently. So if you just have one or two adapters of a certain type, you probably would not care. If you have a lot of adapters that are using the same file that needs to be converted to some other adapter, you will set that up using this this process, and then you customize these so they match your organization and the settings that you want with Cloud Connector and externalized, etc. So that you can do all these externalizations with this. We will also select the retype here. Here we put in the GMSQ that it needs to be using for this. We can specify the different channels. If we want to remap some of these to something else, we can also do that. If we want to say, okay, this ICO, we do not care about a specific message, we can also go in and exclude that from our list of relevant cases to work with. So it becomes a lot easier. And down here we then see all of the different resources that we're using. If we already have mapped an object before, migrated an object before, we will be able to see it in here, and this will enable you to handle dual maintenance. It will inform you if the PI object has been updated afterwards, and then you can decide what to do. Do I want to take the version from the PI, or do I want to use the one I already migrated? And yeah, that is up to the user to decide. It can be really interesting in cases, where you need to do modifications as to adjust for some scenarios. And here you can define which objects you want to use. Do you want to override, create or reuse the shared object? Or do you just want to create it as a local object that should not be updated? When you're using the shared object, that means that if you're migrating something else and updating it, it's really easy to update all the different artifacts at the same time. Okay. Here we can see some of the different challenges that we need to encounter. So there's a $sign that was escaped. There's a container variable. This is not supported in CPI. So we will get some warnings here what to do. We can see that there's an FTP user that needs to be done. And there's also this script collection that we need to deploy as a part of this. Okay, so let's click check again. Now we can select preview. Here we can see the iflow that is being generated, what it looks like. And we can also see it is using this process step down here to handle some of the layouts. And then we can click migrate, and this will then migrate the objects to the backend or to the CPI system, making it easy for us to understand what is going on. Questions so far? Here we can see that it, and this is because we have selected this beta profile that will be called local processes in the next release. The thing we wanted to do was we wanted to split this out into separate processes, so all of these scenarios would be handled in a separate way and making it a lot easier to run these. We can see here we are adding, on this one, we're adding some parameters. It's because in the message mapping, we have a binding to a constant in here. And if we open the message mapping here, we can then see the iflow that is being mapped, and we can see that it also have some function libraries that is being converted into a Groovy script. And here we can see here, it removes the comments, and here we have this, I think in my case, I've uncommented this on the CPI because, just to make demos a little easier. But obviously you would need to go through these and figure this one out. SAP updated or will update this and allow us to use Java mappings instead of for these function libraries. So we'll probably also do an update on those to make sure that it works in a simple way. Good. We'll just say edit, save as version, and then we will deploy it. So one of the things we have here is we can go back here to the migration tool, we can press synchronize. And it is a good thing to, each time you do a versioning, that's important for some part of the processing, to do a synchronization so you can understand what's going on, what's the differences, and what do we need here. Now the synchronization is finished. That means that in the tool, we now have the objects and we have that there's a change on it. So we can actually go in here, we can press versions, we can compare it, and we would actually be able to see what the differences is between these two versions. Because we're using the migration tool, obviously there may be some things that SAP will then update the model with. So sometimes you will see that there is specific scenarios that is being updated. But this versioning is something you would also be able to use on a daily basis when you're managing your integration. What is actually important? What can you see? What are the different changes that you have on your landscape? And there's also some other ones. There's a message mapping comparison if you want to check what is different between mappings, etc. If you have user-defined functions inside a message mapping, they are also migrated over, and they would be using the Java runtime of the system. So they would be compiled differently than the Groovy external libraries that is being done there. But it is a little more difficult to maintain user-defined functions on a mapping, because it is pretty obscure way to see what is going on there, if that makes sense. But they migrated the same way, and when we got access to this new migrating or UDF function library Java, we'll also see how that performs and what we can do to automate mappings for those scenarios. We have a diff to HTML, which is a patch version between the scenarios and what can be done here. Is that okay? Or what you were looking for, or anything else I need to explain in that scenario? Okay, so we got through this, the custom XSLT, migration of iflows, and then the test cases. Good. Okay, so let's go back to our tool here. So we have our migration overview. You can sort this as any OpenUI5, and it is a lot easier sometimes to just sort on test cases or where you have these things. So right now we can easily see here we have migrated this, and we have almost 200 other iflows that is not migrated. So this gives us a good overview of what's going on. If we've set up the productive system, we'd also be able to see if they are connected correctly. If we're not using the Figaf tool for this, we can also go in and say, okay, I've used something else to migrate these. So I can just link to a different iflow and say, okay, this has been migrated to this scenario. So even though you're not using the migration tool, you will still be able to use this overview and link objects to it. And obviously, you may consider using the SAP migration tool for some scenarios. I do think we can, and with our dynamic iflow generation, can create some better iflows that are easier to maintain and run. But there can also be scenario where you just want to import the mappings into some scenarios, etc. And you do have this option out here. You can say, okay, import this operation mapping into the iflow, and if you do that, it will take all of these artifacts and import it into it, but you would still need to select it. And the reason we selected operation mapping is it will not create a CPI operation mapping, but just all the different artifacts as individual attributes inside of it. Okay. So now we got this process to work. The next thing we want to do is we want to migrate the test cases. And to do that, we select here what are the test case we have. We can then select migrate to CPI iflow. We add it to a test suite, create a new one for it. And then we can go in and select where we want to fetch these specific items in. And here in the new release, you can see we have the different stages, and it will be a little different, and we can also determine if there's any problems with it, where you would need to find these ones. So you can go in here and you can say, okay, I want to fetch this from a specific point here, and it will then show it's this point here. We will fetch the data for this this case. So it's really easy to go around and figure out, okay, so where is it that it is important for us to test this specific case. So let's do it like this, as suggested. But yeah, if you've used the SAP's migration, you will then need to select these boxes yourself. We select save, press OK, and now we have created a test case that we can actually run on our CPI system. So if we go here, we can say run on. If you select run, it will run both the PI and the CPI test case because they're in the same group. But if we just select run here, we can see it, and it will be run in this context. And it opens it directly. So now we can see what's going on here. If we click it here, the messages, we can see if the messages was sent correctly to the CPI system. This is really important if there is any problem with access to it or different user roles or anything like that, or the iflow is not deployed, then you'll see what is going on here. You can see where it's been run on by just clicking here. You can see the iflow, and obviously in CPI helper you will then also be able to see these different artifacts. Good. So now we can see we're getting some errors and warnings. Let's check these out. So we can see here the diff here. There's a difference in the date element. Well, that is not really an important object. So we just click cancel to that or ignore. And that means that each time we see this, we will just ignore it. So we'll pull here, full comparison. So now we can see this is green. Both of these is green, and then we're getting one unexpected. And if we look at this, this is then, remember when we created the test case, we had 5 messages. We should have had 6 messages. And because of that, we are getting one that is unexpected. But this is actually also what you would normally do in a migration or any other change. What you can then go and do is you can select the test case and you can go in and select update to use as test case, then we'll drop it. And that means next time we run it, we'll go back here to run. Was run successful. That's a pretty cool improvement. We can see what is going on here. We're getting data about what is polling, and I know some of you did run into some of these things about understanding what was actually processed and what was not processed. Now it's a lot easier to see what is being processed. We can see the object version that we have here. And let me just do one more thing. So if we go back here, select edit, save as version. So now we have 1.2 in it. And if we go back at our messages and press synchronize, now we will inform Figaf that there is a new version of this. Ooh. And so we have the 2.3. So if we run our test case again, we will get a note that says, hey, you have just deployed 1.1, but there's a design time version. So you're not really testing what you're expecting to do. And this is also obviously important for users, that they will see that there's a difference between these scenarios. Cool. 1 hour and 10 minutes for getting a test case migrated and tested is pretty cool. That was all I just wanted to cover here in this this session. There's obviously other things that we could dive into, which would be the DevOps, the transport part, where there's a lot of other scenarios that could be quite useful. But maybe we'll take them another time. So now we have some time for questions. I hope you like this and saw some of the capabilities that we could actually use this. And obviously this is not smooth. There is going to be hiccups. There's going to be these kind of challenges that you need to figure out. Okay, so how do we check these cases? We are obviously trying to resolve it, making it a little easier to run the scenarios. So as well as possible, but obviously we cannot fix or cure all different cases as a part of this. But are there any other questions, comments? Please put them into the chat. Thanks for following along so far. I hope this was what you're looking for, and seeing the complexity or non-complexity of this, and what it actually can be used to manage your migrations in an easy way. And yeah, I would think if you're doing this, run it on your laptop, and then once you've done that, go and configure it on BTP. It will take a little longer to run it in BTP, but at least then you have a better understanding of what it is that you want to achieve, what should be done, what should be changed as a part of this. Cool. Was this what you were looking for? Any questions, comments? I would really appreciate that, to understand, was this good enough level? See where we are here. Yes. Mappings, any questions popped up? But it is. There's a lot of things to learn with this, but I hope this was a way to speed it up, and get you to get the different ideas. And we tried, both with this guide section where you can see a lot of our guides on doing these things from migrations, trying to understand how to create these scenarios. So I think that the places where most of the time would get stuck is on the PI test case recording, and then on the migration of these test cases, because there is going to be something that is not working as you would expect, or can be a little challenging for some of these scenarios. But it is also about what's the scope of the application. We could make a lot easier if we did not need to support all of these different use cases that was needed for such scenarios. Cool. Did that disappear? So if you have EJB parameters, what do you mean with that? Is that in the modules, or is that in the message mappings? Because on modules you can obviously add a module and then you would configure it with some different properties, but you can also on a message mapping operation and ICO configure a parameter that needs to be set there. If it is on the message mapping, we do have the propagation of errors all the way through, or of these variables all the way through. Obviously, we cannot do all of them, like communication channels, because that's a different objects. If you're talking about modules and modules change, we do not support them at the moment, so you would need to add them manually. But I think in a lot of cases, all of these modules is not that important. You may have one or two where you say, okay, this is important. For instance, we use the logging module quite a bit on our scenarios. That is not anything of importance when doing the migration, because it is just something that you need to add there. Does that make sense, or was that what you're looking for? Are there other things that we did not cover that could be seen as a little unclear in this? And obviously, yes, try when you're doing this. Also, well, if you're on an integration suite system, also try with the SAP's assessment and migration tool. There is going to be scenarios that you can migrate with that one, but there is also going to be sessions where, or scenarios where our migration tool will simplify the setup and make it easier for you to get started with it. Just so there's the two different scenarios you need to consider and when to use which of them. But yeah, and then use this manual linking of objects. But I do hope you get to this point creating the report. That is one of the necessary steps in understanding your landscape and thereby be able to plan what is going on with your migrations. Other questions? We do have 4 minutes left, so I think we achieved the goal. I would obviously have loved to see a few more have been able to keep up and see what was going on. But I hope you did see that it is not going to be that complex, and we will be sharing this video also, so you can follow along and see these different sessions and scenarios and pause when you have questions. But yes, thanks for attending. And if there's something you forgot when working with this, just ping me and we can see. I can see if we can resolve that somewhat easy. So thanks for joining. Thank you for the session, and I hope this was what you were looking for and got some good results from it. Thank you.